From radical insurgent with a $10 million bounty on his head to a red carpet welcome at the White House, the rebranding of Ahmed al-Sharra is now complete. The former jihadist becoming the first ever Syrian president invited inside of the Oval Office. We'll ask about the terms and conditions of a visit that surely seals a regional realignment on a scale unseen, you could say, since the 1979 fall of the Shah in Iran. How much did backers Turkey and Syria press for this moment? Where does it leave Israel, who on the same day got a visit from the U.S. president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, to remind his host to play nice with the Turks during phase 2 of the Gaza peace initiative? Does this all mean that the same Donald Trump who campaigned against foreign interventions will wind up involving the United States more, not less, in the Middle East? And where does it leave a Syria where the U.S. still backs the Kurds in the fight against ISIS and where Christian and Druze minorities have plenty of reason to doubt al-Sharra's promise of guaranteeing their safety? More broadly, how soon can the new masters of Damascus deliver a peace dividend to citizens still reeling from decades of dictatorship, corruption, and civil war? Today in the France 24 debate, we're looking at Syria's grand pivot. And joining us from Maine, he was U.S. ambassador to Syria when the uprising against Bashar al-Assad began. Robert Ford, today fellow at the Middle East Institute think tank. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure to be with you.
She covered the war in Syria back when Ahmed al-Sharra was still Abu Mohammed al-Jolani. From Beirut, journalist Rania Abu Zaid, good to see you.
Thank you for having me.
Syrian human rights activist Farah Youssef is with us as well. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And Samir Aita, president of the Arab Economists Circles. Welcome to the show again.
Thank you.
On the go, by the way, you can listen to the show wherever podcasts are streamed. Yeah, from Al-Qaeda affiliate to head of state, the president of Syria invited to the White House. Now, these are stills that we're showing you because the meeting was still ongoing a short while ago. Donald Trump likes to invite the press in, not for this one. Instead, we've been looking in a lot at these images that were taken on Sunday and went viral on social media. Robert Ford, the press not invited in, what does that tell you?
Well, let us see how the White House plays the meeting by the end of the day. I think it is important for viewers to know that there are still people in the Republican Party and in Republican circles who are very cautious about Ahmed al-Sharra. Some of them are very influential, such as Brian Mast, who is a Republican congressman from Florida, who is the chairman of the House of Representatives Foreign Affairs Committee. He is very cautious about lifting the Caesar sanctions. And there's a major personality in the American political scene, Laura Loomer, who has over 1 million followers on Twitter. And she is scorching, very sharp in her criticism of Ahmed al-Sharra. And so I think the Trump administration, while welcoming al-Sharra to the White House, a very visual and important step, at the same time is being a little careful.
Yeah, Laura Loomer, posted to X, formerly Twitter, President Trump, please demand that Giuliani stop committing mass murder of non-Muslims in Syria. Does Donald Trump have to, how much does he have to weigh that? And how much division is there within his camp?
Donald Trump is without question the leader of the Republican Party and the American Make America Great Again movement. There is no one who can challenge him in that leadership. But Donald Trump is also a politician, and he respects Laura Loomer. He has had her to the White House several times, and she is influential with Donald Trump. And so I think he publicly has been very supportive of al-Sharra. I think he is in private as well, but he will want to bring along elements within his own political base that are more skeptical about the Syrian government.
Let me ask you, Rani Abu Zaid, when you were covering the heated early days of Syria's civil war, did you ever think this moment would come where Ahmed al-Sharra, wearing a suit and tie, would be invited to the White House?
It was very hard to imagine back when he was a turban-wearing Salafi jihadi with a long beard and clad in military fatigues. And that was only years after we even got a glimpse of this mystery man who is the founder of Syria's Al-Qaeda branch. So it is quite a transformation. And years before that, Ahmed al-Sharra, then known as, Abu Muhammad al-Julani, that was his nom de guerre, was also detained in Iraq. He was held in U.S. detention centers in Iraq for joining Al-Qaeda. So he's had quite the narrative arc in the span of about 20 years or so.
The break with Al-Qaeda officially comes, he officially declares it in 2016. What happened then? What's happened since?
Well, he made that declaration and he started building his, soon after he started building his proto-Islamist state in Idlib province, which was the main rebel real estate at the time, and it borders Turkey. And he stayed there building his government. It was called the Salvation Government. His group changed names several times to ultimately emerge as Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. And Ahmed al-Sharra, or Abu Muhammad al-Julani as he was known then, increasingly sort of courted Western think tanks and others, including journalists, most famously Martin Smith of PBS, because he wanted to present this image that he was a changed man. And he stayed in Idlib province until late last year when he and his forces barreled south, taking the Syrian capital in less than 2 weeks.
So is he a changed man?
Well, some say that the ideology was merely a means to an end, and the end is that he's now the president of Syria.
You agree with that, Farah Youssef?
Well, I've heard so many interesting terms in the beginning. Former jihadist, their branding is complete. I would have to strongly disagree, and I would like to quote himself. Yesterday, he told Syrian people in America. He met with some of his allies in America, and he told them that he was proud of his history and that he was not ashamed with any faith that he has went through. And in my opinion, this is very important. We need to highlight and stop at these statements that he is making, because it shows that if he is not able to show regret in any way, if he's not able to show to apologize to any of his victims or their loved ones, how are we supposed to just accept that he has been rebranded to this civilian leader for Syria? And plus, when if we don't just stop at the discourse or the statements he's making, if we look at what he's doing in Syria, he's actively creating and fostering a culture of impunity. Everyone in Syria has a green light to commit crimes, to just as long as he's an ally with the current authority, he can do anything he wants, especially if he's part of the family, because we're starting to see the family rule. And I think what's being presented as a diplomatic breakthrough for Syria with this visit is merely theatrical. It's not strategic.
Is it theatrical, though, if he gets the U.S. Congress to agree to lifting sanctions, as that's what ordinary Syrians want?
I mean, in my opinion, we still have sanctions on Syria because of this man. If we had a participatory government from the beginning, we wouldn't have these sanctions today, and we're being punished, we're being blackmailed by the history of this man that he's unfortunately proud of.
Samir Aita?
The sanctions had to be lifted anyhow, because the sanctions imposed since 2011 and the Caesar Acts harmed more the Syrian people, the Syrian population, than Bashar al-Assad. So even though today they are harming the people more and allowing that the people in power, the new people in power, are using the same techniques as Bashar al-Assad. So we've seen emerging a crony capitalism around the people in power. You mentioned the family, you mentioned the thing. So this could be a legitimate, anyhow, target for Mr. Sharaa to do in the US. But he also, I think, want to be legitimized in a definitive way by the US. Every Syrian president get legitimized by the US in the beginning. Hafiz al-Assad get legitimized coming after Black September in 1970. Bashar al-Assad, the Secretary of State, came at the morning of his father and sat with him and etc. So he wanted legitimization improper by the US to stand in power, but this is somehow risky for him. The question is what Donald Trump wants.
What does Donald Trump want? Before I ask what Donald Trump wants, Robert Ford, is Syria's new president a pragmatist or an ideologue?
My own personal feeling after sitting with him for extended conversations 3 times is that he's more of a power seeker than an ideologue. That is not to say he's not an Islamist. He is an Islamist. And his vision of a government is different, say, from Syrians who perhaps are less eager to have a government influenced by religion. But I don't think he's a Salafi jihadi. The mere fact that he, in March, called for elections separates him from Salafi jihadi ideology. It's a different question if the elections can be free and fair. That is a question. But the mere calling for elections would make him an apostate in front of a hardline jihadi ideology. I would just add that Sharaa himself, I think, understands that he needs Western support to rebuild the country. And so he has an immediate interest in maintaining good relations with the West and the Gulf states, I should add.
Yeah, he also, by the way, last month traveled to Moscow, and many wondered if Ahmed al-Sharra's Western pivot was perhaps wavering or whether he was simply doing that to hedge or to add pressure ahead of this trip. Your thoughts on that visit to Moscow, again, 1 month ago, Robert Ford?
Yeah, so I think Sharaa is someone who understands a need for balance in his foreign policy. Certainly, relations between Syria and the United States are better now than they've been in decades. But at the same time, I don't think Sharaa wants to depend exclusively on the West. And so he keeps a line open to Russia. That is in itself remarkable, given the extent of Russia's crimes against the Syrian people during the civil war. I also think Sharaa understands that his armed forces themselves still depend heavily on Russian equipment, and there's certainly no offer of military assistance in terms of equipment from any Western country.
Yeah, that's the essential question, Rania Abu Zaid. When you look at Ahmed al-Sharra, is how strong or weak is he? Right now, Damascus controls roughly 60% of Syria's territory. We have Israel extending its presence in the Golan Heights, Turkish soldiers in the north, a Kurdish-led coalition backed by the United States. You can look at this map. These are all the places where there are foreign troops. And of course, there still are, Rania, those 2 Russian bases on the Mediterranean. So how strong or weak is Ahmed al-Sharra nearly a year after the fall of Bashar al-Assad?
I'd add that there are also American bases in the northeast, alongside their armed Kurdish allies in the Syrian Democratic Forces. So Syria remains a splintered state, and it is heavily influenced by foreign occupation, frankly, in many parts, especially when it comes to the who wasted no time in taking more Syrian territory. And speak to Ambassador Ford's point about Syria's military capabilities. I mean, the Israelis destroyed the remaining military capabilities within hours of us all. So al-Sharaa needs to rebuild unify actually his military and this Syrian army. At the moment, it is comprised of various Islamist factions that he's trying to unite under his rule. Historically, during the years of the Second revolution turned war, these factions fought each other. They fought the regime. So it is not and unify all of these groups. They have said that they have done so, officially, but some of those activities that happened along the Alawite coast and in the Druze areas indicate that perhaps, there are questions as to whether, how much the government sort of controlled or had any sort of input over that, or whether there were some rogue elements that undertook those awful, horrible sectarian massacres.
Yeah, and at the same time, Samir, I'll put it to you. You have the U.S., which is due to ask al-Sharra if they can have troops stationed near Damascus to help and to have Syria join the coalition against ISIS.
Yeah, but for what for? It means putting troops in Syria while Mr. Trump said no more American troops in foreign countries. Questions to use them to do what? Against ISIS? This is a major fight which needs...
Some say it's to replace the Kurdish-led SDF forces in
Damascus. There is no SDF in Damascus. Anyhow, but combating ISIS needs strong collaboration with Iraq, mainly. And this collaboration doesn't exist today between the Syria today and Iraq today. We will see after the elections in Iraq. The other matter...
Elections due to take place on Tuesday, general elections.
Yes. And the other matter is the Israeli incursions and taking place more land and etc. and forbidding any tank or military equipment to get south of Damascus. Even when the Turks put some military equipment to listen and monitor the drones that goes over Damascus, the Israeli bombed them, and there was no reaction. So how the U.S. will play with the base, it was not confirmed, this information, with the Israelis, who feel today that they have full power over the whole region after the 7 October events and what's happening in Gaza and the threats on Lebanon today to strike Lebanon in a very short-coming time. So what will happen with refugees coming from Lebanon, with etc.? The question you didn't ask is, will the Israelis make a deal with Ahmed Sharra?
Let's talk about that right now. You've preempted here, because while Ahmed al-Sharra is in Washington, Jared Kushner, the U.S. president's son-in-law, is in Israel this Monday, making sure that Benjamin Netanyahu won't bail on phase 2 of the Gaza plan, a plan which was to include a big Turkish involvement. Turkey, as was just stated there by Samir, a rival of Israel in the region. The Americans at time seem like they're talking on Israel's behalf, or what they would like the Israelis to be saying. Like at the start of the month, Donald Trump's ambassador to Turkey, who also happens to be a Syria envoy, Tom Barak, addressing a conference in Bahrain.
Syria, in addition to that, is marching towards Israel. We're on our 5th set of discussions with Israel. Border and boundary discussions, de-escalation. You could very quickly have a realignment of a tapestry that we haven't seen in the Middle East.
Robert Frank, is Israel, the way to hear Tom Barak state it, is Israel enthused at the idea of normalizing ties with Syria?
I think in a perfect world, the Israelis would be delighted if tomorrow Ahmed Shara would sign a peace agreement between Israel and Syria and establish diplomatic relations. That's not on the table. Ahmed Shara has made that clear. I think what Samir was saying about a demilitarized zone is more in line with where we are now. We will see if during Shara's visit to Washington, they announce some kind of an Israel-Syria temporary interim security arrangement. I haven't heard anything about it this morning. I think that's an ongoing effort by the United States. It is interesting to me that American media reports say that Ron Dermer, who is an advisor to Prime Minister Netanyahu, has been urging members of the American Congress not to ease sanctions in an unconditional manner.
Yeah, and we have in Israeli daily Haaretz, Zvi Barel, who wrote a couple of days back, if Trump manages to extract from al-Sharaa a promise to join the Abraham Accords, even without a specified date, Israel will have a hard time insisting on a continued presence in Syria. This would also complete the extension of Turkish patronage over Syria, this time under an American license. Al-Sharaa, Netanyahu, and Erdogan will apparently have to share Trump's love. Is that the way you see it as well, Farah Youssef?
I mean, it's very complicated for us Syrians to form an opinion because there's zero transparency with the current authority. We don't know what they're doing. We don't know what they're negotiating, what prices they're paying for what gains they're getting for themselves. Because it's not about rebranding Syria's role. It's about sustaining their
But
power.
on the American side, do you feel as though Trump is doing Israel's bidding, or is Trump working a little bit under the pressure of the Turks and the Saudis?
I think it's both. And Trump said that Israel and Turkey were the ones pushing for the lifting of sanctions on the persons, on al-Sharaa and Anas Khattab, his minister. And for me, these are not Syrian sanctions. These are people who are sanctioned that we are being punished for their actions. But I think at the moment it's not gonna be a normalization process. We're not moving towards an actual normalization with Israel. And we might have some kind of security agreements, not even political agreements, just security agreements, which means a demilitarized zone in the south. And we're starting to see these moves. But we really need to emphasize that this authority does not have the right to normalize with Israel or to do any major agreements of this kind. They're not elected. They're not legitimate. They don't have any internal legitimacy inside Syria, no matter what kind of transactional diplomacy they're doing. I mean, he's in Washington. His Minister of Defense just came back from Moscow, where he was discussing military training with the Russian defense minister. So all these transactions that they're doing for themselves, they do not concern us Syrians. And unfortunately, it's very clear that for Trump and his allies, human rights, women's rights, and a democratic transition in Syria are no longer on the agenda. So we're seeing a huge shift in the discourse that the West has had for Syria. And our seek for justice and accountability is being seen as an inconvenience. So they're trying to move things very fast. They're trying to get as many promises from him. They're trying to get him to sign as many agreements that he would willingly sign. No matter what the price we are paying as Syrians, I don't think we're normalizing with Israel anytime soon, and I don't think he's a good ally for
And how
Israel.
about with Turkey?
With Turkey, it's very complicated because they have so many political and economic interests, and they have very good relations with Israel, economic and political. Even if we look at numbers,
ties. I wouldn't call them good relations.
I mean, if we look at numbers, if we look at the economic relations between the Turkey and Israel, I wouldn't say they're enemies, he's trying to balance or to maintain a choreography between all parties, but it's falling apart very quickly.
So, Rania Abu Zaid, before the fall of Assad, the fault lines were clear, right? You had Russia and Iran on one side, and you had the Gulf states and Turkey on the other. Now, what are the fault lines here when it comes to Syria? Are these adversaries? Are these enemies? Are Turkey and Israel the big rivals? Is there a scramble for Syria at this point? What's going on?
All of the above. All of those parties, with the exception of Iran, are still present. They're still in Syria. They're still trying to, the pieces on the chessboard are shifting, and it's still in a state of flux. So they are the geostrategic players, but domestically there are fault lines too. Those fault lines continue. They persist. There are growing fears among some of Syria's minority communities about just how Islamist al-Sharra and the people around him are. As Farah said, he is an unelected leader, and he is making a huge number of really crucial decisions. And the decision to normalize or not with Israel is one of the key ones. This is a generational conflict. Ahmed al-Sharra was, nom de guerre once again, was al-Jawlani. He is originally from al-Jawlan. So the question of potentially ceding Syrian territory or even agreeing to a demilitarized is a huge face to Syrian sovereignty and its independent decision-making. These are huge issues that Syrians, principally al-Sharra, are sort of unilaterally deciding. So the fault lines are many, and they are deep, and in some cases they are still hard.
You heard Ambassador Ford there, Samir Aiza, saying that Ron Dermer, the close advisor to Benjamin Netanyahu, has been lobbying Congress not to lift the sanctions. So, again, where is this all headed? How much can Syria normalize with the West?
First, my opinion is there is no clear fault line. The whole region is reshuffled after the events in Gaza and Lebanon and in Syria today. So we will see. It's in continuous movement. I don't believe that the Israelis will make any deal with these authorities. First, because they are weak, especially because they take care of trying to manage the relations, foreign relations with Russia, the US, and etc., without caring very much about the internal situation, etc. Any deal with the Israelis will put constraints on the Israelis. And my opinion that Benjamin Netanyahu...
Could Donald Trump put those constraints on the Israelis?
If his theory, but this is really a theory, that...
Because that's part of the thinking about why the U.S. would perhaps like to have troops near Damascus.
Yeah. Look, thinking on that, the only reason I can find is that maybe Donald Trump and the team around him want to show a model of political Islam becoming in power, different from the Muslim Brotherhood that Saudi Arabia, who pushed the whole thing, hates, the Emirates and other countries. An example for Afghanistan, Iran, all political Islam, etc. Here, maybe he wants to put a new political Islam transforming to a power system, maybe dissimilar to they all like business like himself, and show that this is the model to follow by Afghanistan, by Iran, by others. Maybe, but this is the only reason, unless all this is unstable locally in the American politics, because there are lobbies, both with Israel, both with the different Syrian communities lobbying against any normalization with Syria and lifting of the sanctions, or lifting the sanctions without any constraints on the government. And you can see that even if Mr. Al-Sharra said that all Gulf countries are with him, they are not. The Emirates are far from supporting Mr. Al-Sharra, while he is criticizing bluntly Egypt and Iraq, why he needs more Egypt and Iraq in his field and defending him and etc.
But
we are in a fuzzy situation.
He might, Robert Ford, have the right Gulf leader on his side. We're talking about Mohammed bin Salman, who orchestrated that first handshake between Donald Trump and Ahmed al-Sharra. Earlier, we were talking about that far-right activist, Laura Loomer. What does someone like that weigh in the mind of Donald Trump compared to MBS and to Recep Tayyip Erdogan of Turkey?
A fabulous question, and I can't answer it. But what I would say is that Mohammed bin Salman in Saudi Arabia, Recep Tayyip Erdogan in Turkey, and the Emir of Qatar all enjoy very good relations with Donald Trump personally. And Donald Trump makes a very great many of his decisions on the basis of his perception of his personal relations with that foreign leader. And this has always worked in Ahmed Shara's favor, and I see no sign that that will change. Mohammed bin Salman is due in Washington in a few days.
Yeah, we're seeing in the last minutes, the Reuters news agency reporting that Washington has again suspended the imposition of Caesar Act sanctions on Syria. So, Robert Ford, is that just sort of, again, it's this sort of stated limbo continuing?
It's a temporary suspension. In other words, it can be revoked again. The legislation signed by Donald Trump back in his first term is still in effect. Trump is simply doing, by executive order, a temporary measure not to enforce the Caesar sanctions. What the Syrian government and its allies would like to see is the law canceled permanently.
And just because it was referenced earlier, we were talking about Iraq, where they're having a general election on Tuesday. Is there a chance that the pro-Iranian parties could gain steam and you know, this pendulum swing that we described at the outset in the region has its limits?
I worked in Iraq on the ground there for 5 years after the American invasion and several rounds of Iraqi elections early in the new government's establishment period. Iraqi elections are fascinating, but my sense is that Iraqi politicians from all the communities will have to get together and negotiate both a new prime minister. Perhaps Prime Minister Soudani will be carried over. I don't know. I don't think many Iraqis know today. And they will also negotiate a new cabinet and its various members and leadership positions. That's going to take a long time if history is any indication.
All right, so we won't have a clear answer on that soon. Farah Youssef, you've expressed your deep reservations about the new leader in Damascus, but tell us about what you're feeling about the sort of the realignment of the region. How much has the region changed now that Bashar al-Assad is gone, and how much does that offer opportunity for Syria to change?
I mean, I wouldn't say the region has changed since the 8th of December. It's more about the 7th of October that we're seeing major changes in the region. I don't think we're going to be having great relationships with Lebanon, and unfortunately, the entire terminology is changing. We don't hear about democratic transition. We don't hear about human rights in the entire region. And it's very dangerous because just before we started our discussion, we were hearing about the tragic attacks here in France in 2015. And we know that if we don't redirect the entire region to focus on these principles, it needs to be principled. It doesn't need to be transactional in the region. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to get out of this culture of extremism and impunity that is affecting not only Syria but the entire region. And if they're giving al-Sharaa this unconditional love because they want to bring back refugees to Syria, well, this is not going to lead to any stability, nor in Syria, or not in Syria, not in the neighboring countries. You can't trust a jihadi. And we've heard officials over the years talk about Iraq and Afghanistan in similar moments that where regions were shifting and changing. And years after, they would come out and say, we don't know how we thought this could work, or we don't know how we trusted this person or this group. And I think what they're doing, the USA, the UK mainly, and their allies in the region, they're the financially strong allies in the region, they're taking the wrong side of history, and they're going to be accountable. I mean, we're not going to be able to hold them accountable today, but someday the Syrian people is going to hold these people accountable for the massacres we've seen that could have been avoided.
Rania Abu Zaid, so we have two separate motives, right, that we're seeing when it comes to the West's actions on Syria. What you just heard from Farah, countries that want to see Syrian refugees return home. And what we were discussing earlier with Robert Ford, how, there's the personal relationships of a U.S. president who's close to the leaders of Saudi Arabia and Turkey. What do you see as the driving motive of the West right now?
Well, there's another element as well, and that is the old formula that the West has adopted in the Middle East, and that is stability, whether that means dictators, instead of those principles Farah was talking about, democracy, human rights, women's rights. That's why the US backed dictators like Egypt's Hosni Mubarak and many others, because they were pro-Western and they were aligned with Western policy in the region at the expense of these so-called ideals that the West also touted as goals that it wanted to achieve in the region, like democracy, human rights, women's rights. So, forgive the people of the region for being a little bit skeptical about US in particular and Western motives in general. Certainly with the rise of xenophobia in Europe, there are increasing calls for Syrian refugees to return home, claims that the country is stable. It is not stable politically. Vigilante things and assassinations continue. Economically, of course, it is not stable because of the crippling sanctions that were supposed to be smart sanctions. That's what we were told for years, that they were targeted against regime elements, but I fear that they also deeply and profoundly harm Syrian people.
Yeah, Syria, where the currency has lost 99% of its value during 14 years of conflict. It's got a mountain of challenges in rebuilding its broken infrastructure, as experienced in the capital's Yarmouk Palestinian refugee camp.
May God help the new government that took over. They inherited an empty country. The banks are empty, the infrastructure was robbed, the homes were robbed.
Yeah, the situation difficult in many parts of the capital. Samir Aita, you're just back from Syria. You went to Homs, where the uprising against Assad began. What were your thoughts on the flight home?
This is my fifth time to Syria after...
This was 10 days ago.
Yes, I came back last Tuesday. Look, you talked about refugees. If we take Homs, 500,000 people in December 2024, now 750. People living in tents in their ruins. No financing to help the people to be installed somewhere, and etc.
So how are they doing it? With remittances from people abroad, with people who are working?
What saved Syria in these last 10, 11 months are the remittances, who exploded from $4 billion a year to something like $8-9 billion a year. So while INGOs and UN, etc., money is reducing because of US aid stopping and the policies of Trump. So this is what saved the people. And you see some economic activity. but this activity is mainly with products coming from China, from Turkey at cheap prices in many factories. Who standard for the 14 years are closing up. I assisted to the closing of a factory employing 900 people, which is at the scale of Syria important and with no perspective. Then there is hope, but there is fears in this society. Two kinds of fears. One, that the civil war come back again, and while no time in history in Syria sectarian feelings were so high, and these are played
Really?
out. Yes.
It's at their highest.
Yes, much more than during the war, in my opinion, because they are expressed, they are alimented by different media and etc., which are exploited. Go to the Twitter and you will be disgusted in 5 seconds, whatever you say. So the sectarian feeling is high, and on the institutional side, you see nothing. First, on the side of making an army that the people will feel as their national army, as all people, despite of the religion, etc., not only the minorities, but even, let's say, the classical Sunni people. This is still a major point because they are buried, they are covered faces, and etc. You don't feel safe in Syria, and this is a major problem. The second problem is on the institution. They are emptying the institution. They are paying civil servants with sham cash, a non-legal financial thing. You have ministries which are directly financed by foreign powers. Where is the deal? There is no merging between the finance of what was in Idlib and what is in Damascus. And there is becoming clear the appearance of a crony capitalism with shock treatment. I said in an interview that it was like Margaret Thatcher. They multiplied the price of electricity by 10, which means that people will pay half of their revenues in electricity in a month. I don't know how this will happen, but this is the main subject to discuss, that people discuss with today. Multiplied by 10, while international institutions said to them, look, we will help you, while 90% of the people are under poverty. We will help you to make an increase by increments and by steps. They don't want.
We're out of time, unfortunately. If we could go on for another hour. Farah Youssef, that feeling of sectarian rivalry, is that what your loved ones tell you?
Of course. And just yesterday in Damascus, there was a demonstration against Shia in Sayyid Zainab, which is a sacred, I don't know how to say in English, mazar.
Shrine.
Yeah. For Shia, and they were chanting against them and threatening them. So it is very clear and very
present.
Yeah, and even though I'm from a Sunnite family, I'm not directly concerned by this, but I do see it. I see it on social media. I see it when I speak to my friends, and it's becoming very, very dangerous.
Farah Youssef, I want to thank you so much. I want to thank Samir Aita, Robert Ford for joining us from Maine, Rania Abu Zaid in Beirut. Thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate.